The vastness of the Negus sector did not look like a battlefield. It looked like spilled ink on a velvet cloth, punctuated by the cold, unblinking eyes of distant stars that cared nothing for the politics of biological life. Cale Rourke adjusted the thruster bias on his battered freighter, a modified heavy lifter he had christened the Penitent Man. The ship groaned, a sound like a metallic knee joint popping after a long run. It was filled to the brim with hydroponic grain and freeze-dried medical paste, destined for a refugee flotilla 3 sectors over. This was Cale's life now. 3 years ago, he had worn the crisp, high-collared tunics of the diplomatic corps, sipping synthesized wine in climate-controlled orbital stations while debating the semantics of border treaties. That life had ended the moment he refused to sign off on the Treaty of Orov, a document that would have legally classified 3 million colonists as indentured servants to a mining conglomerate. His refusal had been loud, public, and ultimately futile. His superiors forged his signature. The colonists were enslaved, and Cale was court-martialed for gross insubordination and falsifying records, the very crime he had tried to prevent. Now he wore a grease-stained flight suit and smelled perpetually of recycled air and hydraulic fluid. He tapped the dashboard where a warning light flickered. "Come on, old girl," Cale muttered. "Just 2 more jumps and we can pay for that new intake manifold." The proximity alarm screamed, shattering the silence of the cockpit. It was not the lazy beep of a navigational buoy, but the jagged, panic-inducing shriek of a combat alert. Cale slammed his hands onto the flight yoke, disengaging the autopilot. On his sensors, the black void ahead suddenly bloomed with violent orange blossoms, explosions, massive ones. He pushed the throttle forward, not away from the danger but parallel to it, skirting the edge of the radiation flare to get a visual. A kilometer-long vessel was dying in the dark. The silhouette was unmistakable, draconid architecture. It looked like a predatory deep-sea leviathan forged from obsidian and bronze, its hull comprised of sweeping curves and organic ridges rather than human industrial blocks. But the leviathan was bleeding atmosphere and debris. Standard procedure for a civilian hauler was to turn around, engage the warp drive, and run until the fuel cells were dry. Kyle cursed his own reflection in the canopy glass. He saw the tired eyes of a man who had sworn he was done saving people who did not want to be saved. "Computer, scan for life signs," Kyle ordered. The ship's voice was a flat, synthetic monotone. Multiple debris signatures detected. High-yield energy residue. No active transponders from the main hull. Detecting 3. Correction. 2 escape pods. Trajectory indicates they are caught in the gravity well of the wreckage. Cale watched the tactical display. The Draconid cruiser was breaking apart, and the massive gravitational pull of its collapsing engine core was dragging the tiny pods back into the inferno. "I really hate my conscience," Cale said through gritted teeth. He diverted power from the shields to the engines and dove the Penitent Man into the debris field. The ship shuddered violently as it slammed through the expanding cloud of gas and shrapnel. A piece of hull plating the size of a house spun past his canopy. Missing the bridge by 10 meters, Cale wrestled the controls, his knuckles white. He locked onto the nearest pod. The grapple beam whined as it extended, an invisible hand reaching out into the chaos. "Got you," he whispered. The grapple locked. Cale reversed thrust, firing the maneuvering jets to maximum. The Penitent Man groaned in protest, metal screaming against the gravitational drag. For 10 agonizing seconds, they hung suspended in a tug-of-war between salvation and physics. Then, with a lurch that threw Cale against his harness, the pod broke free. He did not wait to check on the second pod. The cruiser's core detonated. A shockwave of silent white light washed over them, stripping away 30% of his rear shielding in a microsecond. Kale punched the emergency jump coordinates, and the stars stretched into lines of infinite light as they vanished into hyperspace. When the ship reverted to real space in a quiet pocket of deep vacuum, Kale exhaled a breath he felt he had been holding since he was 25 years old. He unbuckled and grabbed the medical kit from the bulkhead, moving toward the cargo bay. The escape pod sat amidst crates of grain, steaming and scorched. It was a sleek, teardrop-shaped vessel, adorned with the crest of a three-headed serpent. Draconid nobility. Great. Kale keyed the manual release. The hatch hissed, depressurizing with a smell of ozone and burnt exotic spices. The figure inside was slumped forward, held in place by a stasis harness. Even unconscious. She was terrifying. She was humanoid, but taller than Kyle, with skin the color of polished slate. Her hair was a cascading mane of silver braids woven with small, chiming bells. But it was her armor that held his gaze. It was not just worn, it was grown. The chestplate was a masterwork of bioengineering, a pulsing, translucent carapace fused directly into the flesh of her torso. Beneath the amber-colored surface of the material, Kale could see bioluminescent fluid pumping in rhythm with her heartbeat. This was a living chestplate. He had read intelligence briefings about them. They were symbols of the highest aristocratic power in the Dominion, literally connecting the wearer's life force to their oath of office. He reached out to check her pulse. Before his fingers could touch her neck, her eyes snapped open. They were vertical slits of burning gold. Her hand moved faster than human reflex. In one blur of motion, she had unlatched the harness, seized Kale's wrist, and twisted it with enough force to bring him to his knees. A jagged shard of metal, pulled from the debris of her own pod, was pressed against his jugular vein. "Identify yourself, scavenger," she hissed. Her voice was a low, resonant thrum that Kale felt in his chest as much as he heard it. Kale stayed very still, eyes fixed on the makeshift knife. "I am the guy who just pulled your royal backside out of a gravity well. You are on the freighter, Penitent Man. I am Kale Rourke, and you are bleeding on my clean floor." She stared at him, her golden eyes dilating as she processed the environment. She looked at the grain crates, the flickering lights of the cargo bay, and finally at Kale's face. She released his wrist but did not drop the weapon. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Purple blood seeped from a wound in her side, staining the intricate filigree of her armor. Kale caught her by the elbow before she hit the deck. She stiffened at his touch, revulsion warring with necessity. "Easy," Kale said, guiding her toward a medical cot he had set up. "I am not an assassin. If I wanted you dead, I would have left you floating back there to become stardust." She sat heavily on the cot, clutching her side. "I am Seraphine Vi, commander of the 3rd Vanguard, daughter of the High House of Vi." Kale handed her a sterilized bandage. "Nice to meet you. I am a delivery driver. Press that against the wound." Seraphine looked at the bandage, then at Kale, as if he had handed her a dirt clod. "Do you not have a biosuture ray?" "Fresh out," Kale said, grabbing a scanner. "Budget cuts. We do it the old-fashioned way here. Pressure and patience." She applied the pad to her side, wincing slightly. Her gaze swept over the cramped, utilitarian cargo bay. "This vessel, it is quaint. It is a flying brick," Kale corrected. "But it keeps the air in and the vacuum out." "You are human," she stated, as if identifying a mild infestation. "Guilty," Kale said, checking the readout on the scanner. "Internal trauma is minimal. Your biocore, that armor thing, seems to be accelerating your healing. It is impressive tech. It is not technology," Seraphine snapped, her pride flaring despite her weakness. It is my lineage. It is the weight of my ancestors fused to my very soul. Right, Kale said, tossing the scanner back into the kit. Soul armor. Got it. Look, Your Highness, I do not know who blew up your ship, but I am allergic to royal drama. It gives me hives. My plan is to drop you off at the nearest neutral outpost so you can call for a ride, and I can go back to hauling grain. Sound good? Seraphine narrowed her eyes. Her humor, when it appeared, was dry and sharp as a scalpel. You believe you have a choice, human? If you attempt to ransom me, I will eject you from the airlock and pilot this debris pile myself. Kale laughed, a genuine, tired sound. Lady, if you can figure out how to fly this ship without kicking the impulse manifold every 3 minutes, you can have it. The tension in the room shifted. It did not vanish, but it changed texture. She was no longer looking at him as a threat, but as a puzzle. Why? She asked. Why what? Why fly into a debris field? The probability of your survival was less than 12%. Humans are known for self-preservation, not valor. Kyle turned away, pretending to organize the medical supplies. Let us just say I have a bad habit of not following the odds. Over the next 6 hours, the penitent man limped through the silence of the drift. Kyle sat on the bridge, monitoring the comms channels, while Seraphine remained in the cargo bay, meditating, or whatever it was Draconids did to recharge their scary bio-armor. They clashed over everything. When Kale brought her a ration pack of protein stew, she sniffed it and asked if it was intended for the engine or the pilot. When she demanded he set a course for the Draconid homeworld, he refused, explaining that his fuel cells would not make it halfway across the neutral zone. You fly without a strategic grid, she criticized, standing behind his pilot's chair and watching his hands move over the controls. You rely on reactive adjustments. It is chaotic. It is improvisational, Kale countered. Space is not a chessboard. It is a river. You have to feel the current. Discipline beats intuition, Seraphine said. That is why my people rule 12 systems and yours are scattered like dust. And yet, Kale said, tapping the glass of the fuel gauge, here you are, on my ship, eating my protein stew. She went silent. Kale glanced back to see her looking at a small and a framed hologram taped to the console. It was a picture of Kale in his dress uniform, shaking hands with a Terran senator, smiling a smile that no longer existed. You were a diplomat, she said. The insignia, silver branch on blue, junior grade. Kale snatched the photo and shoved it into a drawer. A lifetime ago and you were discharged, she deduced, her voice devoid of empathy but rich in analysis. Disgraced. I refuse to lie on a report, Kyle said, his voice hardening. That is all you need to know. Seraphine studied his profile. In the Dominion, honesty that defies the hierarchy is considered treason, but it is also the mark of a leader who fears no judgment. She did not compliment him, but the insult he expected did not come. She turned and walked back to the viewport, her metallic boots clanking softly on the deck. A chirp from the communications console broke the mood. Proximity alert, the computer announced. Vessel dropping from warp. Signature matches Dominion frigate class. Your people, Kale asked, his hands flying across the controls to bring up the shields. Seraphine leaned forward, her eyes scanning the readout. The Valedictor. It is a retrieval ship from the Regent's personal fleet. They have found me. Good, Kale said, though he felt a knot of cold dread in his stomach. They can take you off my hands. He opened a channel. Unidentified Dominion vessel. This is the civilian freighter Penitent Man. I have a survivor from the... Hold, Seraphine commanded, her hand gripping his shoulder with bruising force. Do not transmit. Why? They are here to rescue you. Are they? She pointed to the spectral analysis of the approaching ship's weapon systems. Their targeting scanners are active. They are locking onto your engine signature. If they were a rescue detail, they would be hailing us on the emergency band. They are running silent. Kale looked at the data. She was right. The frigate was powering up its main batteries. He quickly adjusted the frequency on his receiver, tuning into the localized military chatter, a trick he had learned from a smuggler in the Io belt. Through the static, a clipped reptilian voice spoke. Target acquired, no witnesses. Secure the asset if possible. If the asset is compromised, eliminate to contain political influence. Kale looked at Seraphine. Contain influence? Her face was a mask of stone, but the light in her chest plate flickered erratically. The Regent fears my return more than he mourns my loss. Kale slammed the throttle forward. Hang on! He threw the penitent man into a corkscrew dive just as the space behind them erupted in green lance fire. The ship shook violently, alarms screaming. You cannot outrun a frigate in this tub, Seraphine shouted, bracing herself against the bulkhead. Watch me, Kale yelled. He was not trying to outrun them in a straight line. He drove the ship toward a cluster of magnetic nebulae, a navigational hazard that confused sensors and stripped shielding. It was suicide for a capital ship to enter, but a suicide run for a desperate pilot. The ship shuddered and groaned, sparks raining down from the ceiling panels. Kale fought the yoke, sweat stinging his eyes. Where are we going? Seraphine demanded, watching the frigate veer off, unwilling to follow them into the soup. Station 9, Kale gasped. It is a backwater sinkhole. Smugglers, mercenaries, corporate spies. The Dominion has no jurisdiction there. A criminal hive, she said with disdain. Exactly, Kale said. The last place a royal princess would ever go. Perfect camouflage. They docked at Station 9 3 hours later. The station was a rotating rusted wheel bolted onto a hollowed-out asteroid. It smelled of ozone, frying oil, and desperation. Kyle threw a heavy, grease-stained cloak over Seraphine's shoulders. Keep the hood up. If anyone sees that chest plate, we are both dead. It glows like a neon sign. I do not hide, Seraphine said, stiffening. Today you do, Kale said, pushing her toward the airlock. Or you can explain to the Regent why you let a human save your life twice in one day. They walked into the chaotic bazaar of the docking ring. It was a sensory assault. Holographic advertisements for illicit cybernetics flickered in the smoky air. Creatures from a dozen species hagged over crates of stolen tech. A dock inspector, a squat insectoid with 4 arms, blocked their path. He tapped a data pad with a claw. Docking fee is 500 credits, plus inspection tax. Kale stepped forward, his charm switching on like a light. Chief, good to see you. You are looking radiant. Have you molted recently? The carapace sheen is magnificent. The inspector chittered, unimpressed. 500? Who is the tall one, my cousin? Kale lied smoothly. Terrible skin condition. Very contagious. We are here to see a specialist. You do not want to get close, trust me. The oozing is nightmare fuel. Seraphine stiffened under the cloak, and Kale prayed she wouldn't snap the inspector's neck. The inspector took a step back. 700, move along. Kale transferred the credits, almost his entire account balance, and guided Seraphine into the crowd. Once they were clear, she hissed at him. Oozing? It worked, didn't it? Kale said, scanning the crowd for a safe place to rest. She looked at him, and for the first time, a flicker of amusement crossed her face, a barely there quirk of the lips. You lie with the ease of a courtier. Cale Rourke. I lie to survive. Cale said, there is a difference. They found a temporary sanctuary in the back room of a mechanic's shop owned by an old contact of Cale's. The room was cluttered with droid parts and smelled of solvent. Cale slumped onto a crate, exhausted. Seraphine removed the cloak. The light from her chest plate illuminated the dim room, casting long shadows. She looked at Cale, really looked at him, studying the way he rubbed his temples, the scar that ran through his eyebrow, a souvenir from a bar fight on Mars. You are damaged, she observed softly. Kyle looked up, surprised by the tone. Aren't we all? She walked closer to him. Her aggression had faded, replaced by a weary intensity. She traced the air near his face, not touching him, but close enough that he could feel the heat of her hand. My people believe that scars are the map of one's history, she said. You carry yours openly. You hide your honor under sarcasm, but you wear your pain on your skin. Cale held her gaze. The air between them felt suddenly thin, charged with static. It was dangerous to look at her this closely. She was beautiful in a way that felt like standing near a cliff edge. Why are you really afraid? Cale asked quietly. It is not the Regent. You could handle him. Seraphine pulled back, her armor clicking softly. She turned away, her fingers brushing the glowing surface of her chest plate. The ambush, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. My fleet's coordinates were classified. Only 3 people in the High Council knew my route. She turned back to him, and the fear Cale had sensed earlier was now naked in her eyes. The front lines are collapsing. Cale, the war is not being lost on the battlefield. It is being sold from the throne room. Someone in my own court sold me to the enemy. Cale stood up. Then we have a problem. Because if they sold you, they won't stop until the transaction is complete. Seraphine nodded. I cannot go home. I cannot trust my kin. I am alone? Cale finished for her. She looked at him, the golden eyes searching his. Not entirely, perhaps. Cale felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. Then he was a relief pilot with a broken ship and 300 credits to his name. She was a deposed warlord with a target on her back. It was the worst possible equation. He grinned, a reckless, tired smile. Well, Cale said, I have always wanted to overthrow a government. How hard can it be? Seraphine did not smile back, but the tension in her shoulders eased. We will find out, she said. Outside, the station hummed with the noise of 1,000 illicit deals, unaware that the spark of a revolution was sitting in a mechanic's back room, waiting to catch fire. The bizarre city of Tantalus 4 did not float so much as it hung in the atmosphere like a glittering, ornate chandelier dropped from the heavens. It was a massive agglomeration of anti-gravity platforms, tethered together by rusting chains and energy bridges, drifting through the upper cloud layers of a gas giant. It was a place where jurisdiction went to die and commerce reigned supreme, a sanctuary for everything illegal, immoral, or simply untaxed. Cale Rourke steered the penitent man into a crowded docking slip, wedging the freighter between a luxury yacht painted in iridescent chrome and a garbage scow that smelled of rotting hydroponics. The docking clamps engaged with a heavy metallic thud. Stay close, Cale said, grabbing a heavy canvas poncho from the locker. And for the love of sanity, keep your head down. If anyone spots that crest on your forehead, the bounty hunters will be peeling us off the pavement within 10 minutes. Seraphine Vi accepted the poncho with the dignity of a queen accepting a coronation robe, though she looked at the grease stains with distinct suspicion. She pulled it over her armor, the heavy fabric doing a poor job of concealing the rigid, organic curves of her living chest plate. I do not hide. Kale, she reminded him, her voice muffled by the hood. Today you do, Kale said, checking the charge on his stun baton. Today you are just another pilgrim with a bad back and a worse attitude. They descended the ramp into the sensory riot of the bazaar. Tantalus 4 was a kaleidoscope of neon and noise. The air was thick with the scent of roasting arthropods, ozone, and exotic perfumes designed to mask the smell of unwashed bodies. Thousands of beings from 100 different species pushed and shoved through the narrow thoroughfares. Merchants screamed from their stalls, hawking wares that ranged from dubious to dangerous. Kale steered Seraphine through the press of bodies, his hand hovering protectively near the small of her back, or at least where her back would be if not for the armored plating. Authentic draconid scales, a vendor shouted, thrusting a handful of painted tin shards into Kale's face. Guaranteed to grant virility and luck, sourced from the Battle of Orav. Seraphine stopped dead. A low growl vibrated in her throat, a sound like a subterranean drill starting up. Those are stamped aluminum, she hissed, her hand twitching toward a weapon she was not wearing. And the Battle of Orav was a blockade, not a skirmish. There were no scales shed. This is an insult to the bloodline. Walk, Kale whispered urgently, grabbing her elbow and dragging her forward. Just walk. You cannot execute a street vendor for bad marketing. They pushed deeper into the market, navigating a labyrinth of hanging silks and holographic dancers. Seraphine moved with a stiff, predatory grace that the poncho could not mask. People parted around her, not because they recognized her, but because her sheer physical presence projected a radius of danger. You are doing a terrible job of blending in, Kale muttered. You are walking like you own the pavement and are considering demolishing it. I am walking with purpose, Seraphine countered. It is you who scuttles like a nervous rodent. I scuttle because I owe money to half the people in this sector, Kale said. They rounded a corner into a plaza dominated by a large, makeshift stage. A holographic projection magnified a human figure pacing back and forth, microphone in hand. The crowd was roaring with laughter. Kale froze. It was Jarlin Vane, a washout comedian who used to perform at the Diplomatic Corps annual dinners before he got banned for jokes about the Admiral's wig. And then, Vane bellowed, his amplified voice echoing off the cloud scrapers. The guy looks at the treaty, looks at the ambassador and says, I would rather fly a garbage truck. And you know who it was? It was Rourke. Ideally, idiot Rourke, the man who traded a pension for a conscience. The crowd laughed. Kale pulled his collar up, trying to shrink inside his jacket. Seraphine looked at the screen, then at Kale. Ideally idiot? She asked. We are leaving, Kale said, walking faster. Hey, Vane's voice cut through the noise. Wait a minute, is that him? Down there by the squid on a stick stand. Rourke. A spotlight swept across the crowd. Kale cursed and shoved Seraphine into a narrow alleyway draped with drying laundry. Your fame precedes you, Seraphine noted dryly, brushing a damp sock from her shoulder. Shut up, Kale said, checking to see if they were followed. We need to find Dr. Xylas before the autograph seekers show up with blasters. Dr. Xylas's clinic was located in the suspended underbelly of the city, a precarious structure bolted to the underside of the main platform. The floor was transparent plagiglass, offering a terrifying view of the swirling gas storms 50 kilometers below. The doctor was a flamboyant avianoid with iridescent blue plumage and 4 spindly arms, each ending in delicate, instrument-tipped fingers. He, or perhaps they, as Xylas referred to themselves in the plural, fluttered around Seraphine, clucking with fascination. Magnificent, Xylas chirped, tapping the surface of Seraphine's chest plate with a sonic probe. Simply magnificent. And utterly ruined. Who did the bypass surgery? A mining driller? Seraphine sat on the examination table, the poncho discarded. The amber light of her biocore pulsed with an erratic, sickly rhythm. It was necessary, Seraphine said stiffly. The bond was unstable. Unstable, Xylas scoffed, adjusting a pair of magnifying goggles. Darling, this is a living chest plate. It is not just Kevlar and batteries. It is a psychosomatic vow interface. It links your nervous system to the Dominion succession laws. You know this. If this biocore fails, you do not just lose armor. You lose your mind, literally. Your neural pathways will unravel like cheap knitting. Kale leaned against the doorframe, watching the procedure. He had known the armor was important, but he had viewed it as advanced tech. Hearing it described as a part of her mind made the stakes suddenly, violently real. Can you fix it? Kale asked. Fix it? No, Xylas said, grabbing a laser scalpel with one hand and a sponge with another. I can stabilize it. I can patch the feedback loop so she does not have a seizure every time she gets angry. But the damage is deep. Someone tried to force this lock open from the outside. The room went silent. Seraphine looked away, staring down through the glass floor at the storms below. It was not from the outside, she said softly. Kale watched her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching shame that looked wrong on her warrior's face. Explain, Kale said. If I am going to risk my neck guarding you, I want to know why your own armor is trying to kill you. Seraphine took a breath. The light in her chest plate dimmed. 5 years ago, the peace summit at Velos, I was involved with a diplomat from the Iron Hegemony, Valerius. Kale raised an eyebrow. A Romeo and Juliet scenario. Classic. He was not a Romeo, Seraphine said, her voice hard. He was a spy. The relationship was a fabrication. He needed access to the Dominion strategic codes, which are stored within the biocore of high commanders. The chest plate opens only for 2 reasons: death or the oath of a bondmate. He tried to trick the sensors. He tried to simulate the emotional resonance of a true oath. She touched the jagged scar on the side of the armor where the gold filigree was warped. He failed. The armor rejected him. But the trauma of the rejection, the dissonance between his lies and the armor's truth-seeking protocols nearly lobotomized me. To survive, I had to manually fuse the locking seals. I altered the code. I made it so the chest plate would never open again. Not for love, not for duty. Xylas stopped working, his beak open in horror. You lobotomized the oath drive? Child, you are walking around with a broken heart, medically speaking. Kale looked at her. He saw the fortress she had built, not just of metal and influence, but of absolute isolation. She had literally welded her heart shut to survive. And now? Kale asked. Now, Seraphine said, looking at him. The bond is rejecting the seal. My biology wants to reconnect with the interface, but the damage prevents it. I am dying. Kale. Slowly. Xylas cleared his throat. I can inject a neural bridge. It will buy you time. A month, maybe 2. But eventually, you need to reset the system. And to do that, you need to unlock it. Do it, Kale said. Buy the time. As Xylas worked, injecting glowing fluids into the ports of the armor, Kale moved to the window. He felt a strange magnetic pull toward her. It was not just pity. It was a recognition of a fellow outcast. He had destroyed his career for a truth no one wanted. She had destroyed her heart to protect a truth no one valued. When the procedure was done, Seraphine stood up. She looked stronger. the light in her chest plate steadying to a warm hum. She tossed a pouch of gems to Xylus, worth more than Kale's ship, and pulled the poncho back on. "Thank you," she said to Kale, not looking at him, "for not laughing. I only laugh at things that are funny." Kale said, "Betrayal is not funny." They exited the clinic into a service corridor, a narrow steel tube running between the station's sectors. Steam hissed from overhead pipes. "We need to move," Kale said. "That comedian blew our cover. I have a bad feeling that—" The air in front of them shimmered. "Down!" Kale roared. He tackled Seraphine, slamming her into the metal grating of the floor just as the space where her head had been standing evaporated in a pulse of superheated plasma. "Sniper!" Kale yelled, scrambling for cover behind a stack of shipping crates. A figure materialized at the end of the corridor, a stealth suit mercenary, face obscured by a digital visor. Another shot burned a hole through the crate inches from Kale's ear. Seraphine moved. She did not have a weapon, but she was a weapon. She kicked a steam valve next to her, rupturing the pipe. A jet of scalding white vapor blasted into the corridor, creating a wall of fog. "Move!" she commanded, grabbing Kale's collar. They sprinted blindly through the steam. Laser fire zipped past them, sizzling in the damp air. They turned a corner, then another, sliding down a maintenance chute that dumped them onto a lower catwalk. They were alone, suspended over the abyss of the gas giant, the roar of the station's engines drowning out the chaos above. Kale leaned against the railing, gasping for air. Seraphine stood facing him, her chest heaving. The poncho was gone, lost in the scramble. Her armor was exposed, glowing fiercely in the gloom. "That was close." Kale wheezed. "Too close. They knew exactly where we were." Seraphine did not answer. She was staring at him. Her hands were still gripping the lapels of his flight jacket, her knuckles white. She was not looking at the exit. She was looking at his face, her eyes wide, the vertical pupils trembling. "You shielded me," she said, her voice sounding strange, stripped of its usual command. "Part of the job," Kyle said, trying to pry her hands loose gently. "I am the bodyguard, remember? You put your body between mine and the plasma bolt. You did not think. You moved. Instinct," Kale said. "No." Seraphine stepped closer, crowding him against the railing. The heat radiating from her chest plate was intense, a physical pressure, not instinct. Truth, the armor. It felt you. Kale froze. "What do you mean? It felt me." "When you tackled me," Seraphine whispered, her gaze dropping to the glowing biocore, then back to his eyes. The pain in the seal stopped. For a second, the dissonance vanished. She looked bewildered, terrified, and exhilarated all at once. The adrenaline of the near-death experience was crashing into something else, something ancient and biological that Kale did not understand but could feel vibrating in the air between them. "Kale," she said, and her voice was a direct cultural challenge, a ritual phrase he had read about in xenology textbooks but never heard spoken. "You saved my life. You stood between me and the void. By the laws of the first flame, a life saved demands a debt paid." She released his collar and took a half-step back, her posture rigid, formal, yet her eyes burning with a desperate intensity. "What do you want?" she asked. The question hung in the humid air. It was not a casual inquiry, and it was a test, a loaded gun. Kale looked at her. He looked at the slate-colored skin, the silver braids, the terrified arrogance, and the glowing, broken armor that held her together. He thought about the gems she had tossed to the doctor. He thought about the ship he could buy. He thought about safety. But he was Kale Rourke. He was the man who refused to sign the treaty. He was the man who drove into debris fields. He stepped forward, invading her personal space, matching her intensity. He decided to tell the truth, the wildest, most dangerous truth he could find. "I do not want your money, Seraphine," Cale said, his voice rough, "and I do not want a ride out of here." "Then name it," she breathed. Cale smiled, a sad, crooked expression. "Your heart," he said. He meant it metaphorically. He meant he wanted the person beneath the armor, the woman who was scared and proud and lonely. He meant he wanted to be let in. Seraphine froze. She looked at him as if he had spoken a word in a dead language that only she understood. She did not look offended. She looked stunned. The audacity of the request seemed to short-circuit her defenses. "My heart," she repeated, the words tasting strange on her tongue. She looked down at her chest plate. The amber light was pulsing rapidly now, a frantic staccato beat. She looked back at Cale, and he saw a decision form behind her eyes, a decision that was reckless, final, and terrifying. She reached up with both hands. Her fingers found the hidden latches under the collarbone, the ones she had welded shut 5 years ago. "Seraphine?" Cale said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "What are you doing? You asked for the truth." "Cale Rourke," she said, her voice trembling with a terrifying power. "You asked for the one thing I thought I could never give again." There was a sound like tearing metal, a high-pitched whine of servos fighting against fused alloys. Her fingers bled as she forced the mechanism. "Don't," Cale said, reaching out. "You will hurt yourself." But the mechanism gave way. With a hiss of pressurized gas and a sound like a great bell tolling underwater, the center of the chest plate split open. The light was blinding. The light. Pure golden radiance spilled out, illuminating the dark catwalk, casting their shadows long and sharp against the station hull. Inside the cavity of the armor, suspended in a field of magnetic fluid, was the biocore. It was not an organ, but a crystalline matrix, pulsing with the rhythm of her life. It was the physical manifestation of her oath, her lineage, and her soul. Seraphine reached into her own chest. Her hand passed through the containment field. She grasped the central node, the oath emblem. It was a fist-sized sphere of warm, living crystal. She pulled it out. The light in her eyes dimmed slightly as the connection was severed, but she remained standing, held up by sheer will. She held the glowing sphere out to Kyle. "Then take what you asked for," she said. Cale stared at the object in her hands. It was humming. He could feel the heat of it against his face. He realized with a jolt of absolute horror what was happening. This wasn't a metaphor. In Draconid culture, the exchange of the biocore emblem was the ultimate binding contract. It was marriage, fealty, and soul bonding wrapped into one irreversible act. "Seraphine," he stammered, backing away. I didn't mean literally. Take it," she commanded, her voice weak but imperious. "Do not make me a beggar in my own offering." Cale stopped. He looked at her shaking hands. If he refused her now, after she had broken her own seals to offer it, the shame would destroy her. It would be a rejection far worse than the spy's betrayal. He reached out, his human hands, scarred and grease-stained, closed around the Draconid emblem. It was heavy. It felt like holding a beating heart. A shockwave of sensation traveled up his arms. He felt a sudden rush of emotions that were not his own. Fear. Relief. A desperate, overwhelming gratitude. And a fierce, burning possessiveness. He gasped, nearly dropping it. The moment his skin touched the crystal, the chest plate on Seraphine's body flared white. The connection was made. The feedback loop closed. Across the station and across the sector, scanners spiked. on the catwalk. Kale stood holding the glowing heart of a Draconid commander. Seraphine slumped against the railing, looking at him with an expression of exhausted triumph. "You are bound," she whispered. Kale looked at the object, then at her. "I think I just made a huge mistake." Before she could answer, the holographic billboards on the level above them flickered and changed. The advertisement for Synth Cola disappeared, replaced by a breaking news alert. A jagged, grainy video played, footage from a black market body cam, likely from the sniper or a hidden drone. It showed the scene they had just enacted. It showed Seraphine opening her chest. It showed Kale taking the emblem. The headline screamed in bold, red galactic script, "Heart Thief." A voice boomed over the station's public address system. "Attention. By order of the Dominion Regent, the human known as Kale Rourke is designated a Class 1 felon. He has stolen the royal biocore of Commander Seraphine Vi. The crime is spiritual violation." Kale looked up at the screen. "Stolen? I didn't steal it. She gave it to me." Seraphine laughed, a weak, breathless sound. "To them, there is no difference. A human cannot own a dragon's heart. Therefore, you must have stolen it." The PA system continued. "Bounty is set at 10 million credits. Dead or alive, 10 million. Kyle noted, his eyes widening. "That is a lot of zeros." Laser fire erupted from the service door above them. The sniper had backup. A squad of armored enforcers poured onto the upper walkway. "Give me the emblem," Seraphine said, holding out a port on her belt. Kale hesitated, then slotted the glowing crystal into the containment pouch at her hip. It did not go back into her chest. The ritual exchange was done. He was the keeper now. "Run?" Kale asked. "Run." Seraphine agreed. They took off down the catwalk, the metal ringing under their boots. Red laser bolts slashed the air around them, sparking against the railing. Kale grabbed Seraphine's hand, a gesture that was no longer just tactical, but legal and binding. "We are going to have a very long talk about cultural metaphors when we get back to the ship," Kale yelled over the roar of blaster fire. "If we get back to the ship," Seraphine shouted back, firing a scavenged pistol she had pulled from somewhere. They leaped a gap in the walkway, suspended over the endless drop, falling toward the docking bay and a future that was suddenly, terrifyingly shared. Kale Rourke, the diplomat who wouldn't sign a treaty, had just signed the most dangerous contract in the galaxy, and he had done it for a heart he didn't know how to hold. The mining moon of Omelos was a drowned world. It hung in the shadow of a gas giant like a shriveled gray fruit, battered by storms that never ended and winds that tasted of copper and old regrets. Rain fell in sheets of relentless, freezing sleet, turning the surface into a slurry of mud and industrial runoff. Kale Rourke brought the penitent man down in a canyon shielded from the worst of the gales. The landing gear sank 2 feet into the muck with a wet, sucking sound. "Welcome to paradise," Kale said, killing the engines. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the drumming of rain against the hull. Seraphine Vi stood by the viewport, her arms crossed over her chest plate. The golden light of her biocore was dimmed to a faint amber pulse, a conscious effort to avoid detection. She looked out at the bleak landscape, where makeshift tents and shelters made of scavenged scrap metal huddled against the canyon walls. "This is a refugee camp," she asked. "It looks like a graveyard." "It is a waiting room," Kale corrected, unbuckling his harness. "For people who have nowhere else to go. Most of them are running from the war zones your people and mine turned into parking lots." He did not say it with malice, but the truth of it hung in the air like smoke. Seraphine stiffened. She was a commander of the Dominion. She had viewed war from the bridge of a cruiser. where casualties were statistics and collateral damage was a strategic variable. Here, in the mud, the variable had faces. They disembarked into the biting cold. Cale pulled his collar up, carrying a crate of medical supplies. Seraphine walked beside him, wrapped in a heavy thermal cloak, her boots sinking into the sludge. The camp was a desperate hive of activity. Beings from a dozen species, Terrans, reptilian krell, insectoid vex, huddled around chemical burners. The smell was a mix of unwashed bodies, ozone, and frying synth protein. As they walked, eyes followed them, hollow, exhausted eyes. A krell mother pulled her hatchlings closer as Seraphine passed. A human elder spat on the ground near her boots. They did not know who she was. The cloak hid her crest and armor, but they recognized the bearing of a soldier. Seraphine stopped. She looked at a group of men trying to shore up a collapsing shelter against the wind. They were shouting, disorganized, their efforts futile against the gale. "They are doing it wrong," she muttered. "The structural integrity will fail if they anchor it to the shale. They need to brace against the basalt ridge, not your command." "Seraphine," Cale warned softly. "We are just passing through." She ignored him. The instinct to order, to organize, was deeper than her caution. She marched over to the group. "You!" she barked, her voice cutting through the wind. "The anchor point is weak. Move the struts 3 meters to the left. Wedge them into the rock fissure." The men stopped, staring at the tall, cloaked stranger. One of them, a burly human miner with a laser-burned scar across his cheek, sneered. "And who are you? The foreman?" "I am someone who knows that shale crumbles under torsion," Seraphine snapped. "Do it, or your roof will collapse within the hour." The miner looked ready to argue, but the sheer, undeniable authority in her voice stopped him. He grunted, gestured to his crew, and moved the struts. 10 minutes later, a gust of wind slammed into the shelter. The shale crumbled where they had been, but the new anchor held firm. The miner looked at Seraphine, nodded once, a grudging respect, and went back to work. Seraphine returned to Cale, who was distributing antibiotic patches to a line of coughing children. He looked up at her, a smear of mud on his forehead, and smiled. "You just cannot help yourself, can you?" "Chaos offends me," she said defensively. "Inefficiency is a form of death." Kyle handed a nutrient bar to a child and stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. "Well, General, if you are done fixing architecture, grab a crate. These people need food more than they need structural engineering." For the next 3 days, the dynamic between them shifted. Kyle was the heart of the operation, moving easily among the refugees, trading jokes for information, using his charm to diffuse tension. He was a creature of empathy, sensing needs before they were spoken. Seraphine was the spine. She could not offer comfort, it was not in her nature, but she offered security. She reorganized the camp's perimeter watch. She fixed the water filtration system that had been broken for 6 months. She showed the Krell how to waterproof their tents using resin from the local flora. She worked until her muscles burned, stripping away the distance that had always separated her from the consequences of her command. She saw the limps, the burns, the starvation. And without the shield of her rank, she had to let the guilt hit her, raw and unfiltered. On the 4th night, the storm intensified. They took shelter in a small, hollowed-out cave at the edge of the camp that Cale had secured for them. It was cold, damp, and smelled of wet stone. Cale set up a small heater unit while Seraphine sat on a bedroll, removing her boots. The tension of the last few days, the flight, the bounty, the heart thief accusation, seemed to fill the small space. Cale cleared his throat. I think I am getting the hang of this oath-bound thing. Seraphine looked up, one eyebrow arched. Oh? Yes, Cale said. He stood up, faced her, and performed a deep, sweeping bow, sweeping his left hand toward the ground while keeping his right hand over his heart. Seraphine stared at him for a long moment. Then, a sound escaped her, a short, sharp bark of laughter. Cale straightened up, grinning. What? Was my form off? Your form was impeccable, Seraphine said, a rare smile touching her lips. For a chaotic jester asking forgiveness for spilling wine. Cale blinked. Excuse me? You bowed to the left, Seraphine explained, amusement softening the hard lines of her face. In Draconid culture, the left side is the seat of the liver, which filters toxins. You just honored my ability to process alcohol. If you wish to honor a bondmate, you bow to the center right, the seat of the fire gland. Cale laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Great, I basically told you. Nice liver, Your Highness. It is a very efficient liver, Seraphine noted dryly. But yes, you have much to learn. Cale Rourke. The humor faded into a comfortable silence. The storm howled outside, isolating them from the galaxy. It was time for the ritual that had developed between them, unspoken but essential. Cale reached into the pouch at his belt. He pulled out the oath emblem. The crystal sphere pulsed in the dim light, warm and humming. It was the physical manifestation of her soul, her power, her identity. And he was carrying it in a tool pouch. He walked over to where she sat. He did not hand it to her carelessly. He held it with both hands, treating it with a reverence that always caught Seraphine off guard. Safe and sound, Cale said softly. He placed the emblem on the small crate that served as a nightstand next to her head. Seraphine watched him. Her chest plate, the empty housing where the emblem belonged, felt cold and hollow. The bond between them was active. She could feel a low-level hum of his presence in the back of her mind. But the physical separation of the core was a vulnerability she was still learning to endure. Why do you do that? She asked quietly. Do what? Cale asked, sitting on his own bedroll across the small fire. You give it back. Every night, you place it near me. By rights, as the holder, you should keep it on your person, to ensure my loyalty, to ensure I do not run. Cale looked at her, his expression serious. I am not your jailer, Seraphine, and I am not your owner. You gave me that because you needed to save a life, mine and yours. I am holding it because the Dominion wants to destroy it. But I do not possess it. It is yours. It will always be yours. Seraphine looked at the emblem, then at Cale. She had grown up in a court where affection was a transaction and loyalty was enforced by bio-coded collars. The idea that someone could hold power over her and choose not to use it was a foreign, dizzying concept. You are a strange human, she whispered. I am just a guy who knows that love is not about ownership, Cale said. It is about... He stopped, realizing he had used the word. The air in the cave suddenly felt very thin. Seraphine did not flinch. She leaned forward, the firelight dancing in her vertical pupils. About what? She challenged softly. Cale held her gaze. About protecting the things that matter. Even when it scares you to death. Seraphine stood up. The distance between them was 5 feet, but it felt like inches. She walked over to him, the heavy fabric of her flight suit rustling. She knelt on the stone floor in front of him, bringing her face level with his. He could smell the ozone scent of her skin, the faint metallic tang of the armor. You are scared? She asked. Terrified, Cale admitted, his voice rough. I have a 10 million credit bounty on my head and a dragon lady in my cave. Seraphine reached out. Her hand, cool and strong, cupped his jaw. Her thumb traced the scar on his cheek. The bond, she murmured. I can feel it. Through the emblem. When you are near it, I feel what you feel. What do you feel now? Kale whispered. Seraphine leaned in closer. Her forehead rested against his. The cold metal of her chest plate pressed against his chest. I feel desire, she said, her voice dropping to a smoky thrum, and a fear that you are not enough. She pulled back slightly to look him in the eyes. You are enough. Kale. You are more than enough. The space between them collapsed. It was not a kiss. Not yet. It was a collision of foreheads, of breath, of shared desperate heat in a freezing world. Kyle's hands moved to her waist, his fingers brushing the clasps of her armor. He hesitated. She did not pull away. She leaned into his touch. Her breathing hitched, a sound that was half gasp, half growl. For a woman raised in iron and protocol, this vulnerability was more intimate than nakedness. His hands moved up to the cold ridges of the chest plate, his thumbs tracing the empty setting where the emblem belonged. She shivered, her eyes closing, her head tilting back. Kale, she breathed. The moment hung there, suspended on a razor's edge of control. They were both losing it. The walls of duty and species and war were crumbling under the simple, terrifying weight of needing another person. Suddenly, Kale gasped. He pulled his hands back as if burned, clutching his own chest. What is it? Seraphine asked, her eyes snapping open, hazing with confusion. Kale's eyes were wide. He wasn't looking at her, and he was looking inward. Cold, he stammered. I feel cold, like ice water in my veins, and fear, sharp, panicked fear. Seraphine froze. She grabbed the emblem from the crate. It was pulsing with a jagged, discordant rhythm. That is not your fear, she said, her voice hardening instantly into command mode. It is mine. Or rather, it is the echo of a betrayal. She stood up, clutching the emblem. The romantic haze evaporated, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of a predator. Someone is here, someone I trusted. The bond reacts to the proximity of bloodkin who harbor ill intent. It is a defense mechanism. Kale was on his feet, blaster in hand. How close? Close, Seraphine said. A chirping sound broke the silence. It came from Kale's long-range comms unit in the corner. A priority channel override. Kale looked at the display. It is encrypted. Dominion Royal Cipher. Open it, Seraphine ordered. Kale keyed the receiver. A hologram flickered into existence in the center of the cave. It was a draconid male, young, with the same silver-braided hair as Seraphine but wearing the dark robes of a house adjudicator. Cousin? The hologram spoke. His voice was smooth, cultured, and dripped with false sorrow. Vela, Seraphine hissed. I know you are on Omelos. Seraphine, Vela said, examining his manicured claws. The bounty hunters are circling. The Regent has authorized an orbital bombardment to flush you out. He does not care if he burns the refugees to get to you. Seraphine stepped into the light of the hologram. You sold me out. Vela, I felt it. I did what was necessary to save our house. Vela replied, unperturbed. The Regent was going to purge the entire Vi bloodline because of your indiscretions. I negotiated a stay of execution. By offering me up, by offering you a chance to restore your honor, Vela said. Meet me at the old terraforming spire on the North Ridge at dawn. Bring the human. Bring the emblem. We will perform the ritual of reclamation. You surrender the biocore to the house, and you will be allowed to live in exile. The human will be given safe passage. And if I refuse? Then the bombardment begins at 0800. Every living thing on that moon will die, including your pet human. The hologram flickered and died. Seraphine stood in silence, her fists clenched at her sides. Cale watched her, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with the echo of her rage that was bleeding through the bond. "It is a trap," Cale said flatly. "Obviously," Seraphine said. "The ritual of reclamation is a lie. It is a public execution. They will strip the biocore, burn out my nervous system, and parade my corpse as a warning to dissidents." She turned to Cale. "We are leaving. Now. If we launch immediately, we can break orbit before their blockade tightens." "And the refugees?" Cale asked. Seraphine paused. She looked at the tent flap, where the sound of the wind was joined by the distant muffled coughing of the camp. "They are not our mission, Kyle. I am the mission. If I die, the truth about the war dies with me." Cale holstered his weapon. He walked over to her and took her hands. They were cold. "Seraphine, look at me." She refused to meet his eyes. "We have to survive, Cale. That is the logic of war." Cale squeezed her hands. "You told me once that you made yourself hard because love was a weakness. That you welded your heart shut because vulnerability got people killed." Seraphine looked at him then, her eyes full of anguish. "And I was right. Look at us. I am hesitating because of you. I am weak because of you." "No," Cale said fiercely. "You are wrong. Love is not a weakness. It is a force multiplier. It expands the perimeter of who you protect." He gestured to the door. "Vela expects the old Seraphine, the one who cuts her losses, the one who runs, the one who cares only about the mission. He does not expect the Seraphine who spent 3 days fixing water filters and bracing tents." "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I am saying we go to the spire," Cale said. "We go to the meeting? To die? No, to turn the table." Cale's eyes glinted with a dangerous, reckless spark. "You said the bond allows emotional resonance, right? It transmits feelings?" "Yes." "And Vela is bringing a retrieval team? And likely broadcasting the whole thing to the Regent to prove he captured you?" Seraphine nodded slowly, seeing where he was going. "Then let us give them a show," Cale said. "We do not just fight them. We use the connection. We use the broadcast. We show the galaxy exactly who the traitors are." "It is suicide," Seraphine said. But a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "It is poker," Cale corrected. "And I have an ace up my sleeve." "What ace?" "We found something in the refugee data logs," Cale said, pulling a data chip from his pocket. "While you were fixing tents, I was decrypting the flight recorder of a refugee ship that fled the ambush zone. It has telemetry. It shows the Dominion ships that attacked you weren't just Dominion. They were flying in formation with corporate mercenaries, Iron Core Industries." Seraphine's eyes widened. "The weapons manufacturers. Exactly. They are not just selling you out. They are manufacturing the war to sell the weapons to fight it. And your cousin is the middleman." Seraphine took the chip. Her hand closed over it. The amber light in her chest plate flared, turning a deep, angry crimson. "We go at dawn," she said. The terraforming spire was a skeleton of rusty metal jutting out of the storm clouds like a broken finger. At the summit, the wind was a deafening roar. Vela stood on the landing platform, flanked by 4 heavy assault droids and a dozen house guards. A drone hovered nearby, its camera lens glowing red, broadcasting the feed to the Dominion High Council. Seraphine and Cale stepped off the lift. Seraphine wore her armor, but the chest plate was still open, a gaping wound in the metal. Kale walked beside her, carrying the emblem in a clear containment box. "Cousin!" Vela shouted over the wind, spreading his arms. "You came. I am impressed. Cut the theater." "Vela," Seraphine said, her voice amplified by her helmet speakers. "I am here for the deal. Safe passage for the human." Vela smiled. "Of course. Hand over the emblem." Kale stepped forward. He held up the box. "You want this?" Kale shouted. "The legendary heart of the Dragon Lady? The symbol of your house's honor? Give it to me. Human." Vela sneered. Kale looked at Seraphine. She gave him a microscopic nod. Kale didn't hand it over. He opened the box. He took the emblem in his bare hand. The bond flared. Kale squeezed the crystal, focusing all his fear, all his anger, and all the raw data from the chip into the connection. "Now!" Kale yelled. Seraphine screamed. It was not a scream of pain, but a sonic projection, amplified by her armor's vocal synthesizers. She channeled the feedback loop from the emblem, turning the emotional resonance into a physical shockwave. The guards grabbed their heads, staggering as a wave of psychic pressure slammed into them. Kale threw the emblem, not at Vela, but to Seraphine. She caught it mid-air. She didn't put it in her chest. She slammed it into the interface port of the Spire's main transmitter array. The Spire hummed. The broadcast drone overhead caught the signal. "What are you doing?" Vela shrieked, drawing a vibro blade. "Broadcasting the truth," Seraphine roared. The data from the chip, amplified by the biocore's oath frequencies, hijacked the drone's feed across the Dominion, on millions of screens. The image of Vela was overlaid with the flight telemetry, the Iron Core Industries logo, the bank transfer record showing payments from the Regent's office to the mercenary fleet. "The lie is over, Vela," Seraphine shouted. "The galaxy is watching." Vela looked at his guards. "Kill them. Kill them all." But the guards hesitated. They were house troops, loyal to the lineage, not the man. They looked at the data scrolling on their tactical HUDs. They looked at their commander, standing tall and defiant. They lowered their weapons. "Traitors!" Vela screamed. He lunged at Kale, the blade humming. Kale didn't have time to draw. He raised his arm to block, bracing for the cut. But Seraphine was there, faster than thought. She caught Vela's wrist in one armored gauntlet. She twisted, a sickening crunch echoing over the wind. Vela dropped the knife, howling. Seraphine kicked him in the chest, sending him sliding across the wet grate of the platform. He stopped at the edge, staring down into the abyss. "It is over," Seraphine said, looking down at him. Vela laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. "You think this saves you? You have just started a civil war. The Regent will burn everything." "Let him try," Seraphine said. She turned to the drone, to the camera that was still rolling. She looked directly into the lens, her golden eyes blazing. "I am Seraphine Vi. I was betrayed by my kin, but I am not alone. To every soldier who fights a war for profit, to every citizen starved to buy a weapon, look at the truth. The enemy is not at the border. The enemy is on the throne." She reached out and pulled the emblem from the transmitter. She walked over to Kyle, in front of the guards, in front of the drone, in front of the galaxy. She handed the emblem back to him. "Hold this for me," she said softly. "We have work to do." Kale took it. He smiled, tired and wet and terrified, but alive. "Aye, Commander." The feed cut to black, but the signal had already gone out. On the moon below, in the refugee camp, a cheer went up that rivaled the storm, and across the stars, the silence of obedience began to crack. The galaxy was not burning yet, but the smoke was visible from every star system in the Dominion. The broadcast from the mining moon had done exactly what Cale Rourke had hoped and Seraphine Vi had feared. It had shattered the silence. Inside the cockpit of the penitent man, the holographic news feeds were a chaotic mosaic of dissent. On one channel, a young Draconid flight lieutenant with soot on his armor was pledging his squadron's allegiance to the true commander. On another, a sleek, silver-tongued aristocrat from House Vela was explaining to a Senate committee that Seraphine was suffering from neural hijacking, a rare condition where a human parasite, Cale, had chemically enslaved her will. "They call me a parasite," Cale muttered, kicking his feet up on the console. "Last week I was a scavenger. I suppose that is a promotion." Seraphine did not smile. She stood in the center of the cramped bridge, staring at the star chart projection. The golden light of her chest plate was steady now, but her posture was rigid. "They are not just attacking your character, Kyle," she said. "They are invalidating your agency. If they can convince the populace that you are controlling me, then my accusations of treason become the ravings of a puppet." She swiped a clawed hand through the hologram, scattering the news feeds into digital dust. "We need more than a broadcast," she said. "We need law. We need the provenance of the oath." "That is why we are here," Kyle said, dropping his feet to the floor and gripping the flight yoke. Destination ahead, the vault of the first breath. Through the viewport, a massive structure emerged from the shadow of a rogue planetoid. It was not a station so much as a cathedral floating in the void, carved from a single asteroid of white marble and wrapped in a web of ancient, dormant defense satellites. It was the legendary repository of the Draconid founders, a place that had not been visited by a living soul in 300 years. Kyle guided the freighter through the debris field of broken satellites. The silence of the place was heavy, pressing against the hull. "Are you sure this place has the answers?" Kyle asked. "Or are we just breaking into a museum to read the plaques?" "The first breath contains the original biocodes," Seraphine said, her voice hushed. "Before the houses, before the wars, before the chest plates became symbols of dominance. If there is a precedent for a bond between species, it is buried in those data tombs." They docked at a silent, vacuum-sealed airlock. Cale checked his blaster, while Seraphine adjusted the flow of coolant to her armor. She looked at him, and for a moment, the commander vanished, replaced by the woman who had held his hand in the storm. "Cale," she said softly, "the guardians of this place, they are not biological. They are relic drones. The texts say they judge the soul, not the badge." "Great," Cale said, forcing a grin. "My soul is mostly sarcasm and caffeine. I am sure they will love me." They cycled the airlock and stepped into the vault. The interior was vast, a cavern of polished obsidian lit by luminescent moss that grew in the carvings on the walls. The air was stale and cold, smelling of time itself. In the center of the hall stood a massive pillar of crystal, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic blue light. "Access the interface," Seraphine whispered. "I will cover the entrance." Cale walked toward the pillar. His boots echoed loudly on the stone floor. He felt like an intruder in a church, a feeling that was compounded when the shadows detached themselves from the ceiling. 3 geometric shapes, floating spheres of bronze and glass, descended silently. They hovered between Kyle and the pillar. A single red eye opened in the center of the lead drone. "Halt," a voice spoke. It did not come from the drone but vibrated directly in Cale's skull. "State your intent." Cale straightened his jacket. He had dealt with customs agents, border patrols, and angry warlords. He put on his best diplomatic face, the one that had almost gotten him promoted before he got court-martialed. "Greetings, noble sentinels. Kale projected, his voice smooth and authoritative. I am Kale Rourke, former lieutenant of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, currently acting as escort to Commander Seraphine Vi of the High House. We request access to the archives pursuant to the emergency succession protocols of... The drone emitted a sound like a grinding gear. False, the voice in his head said. Authenticity rating 0. Deception detected. Wait, Kale said, holding up a hand. I am not deceiving you. She is right there. That is Seraphine Vi. Look at the armor. The drone did not look. Weapons charged. A hum of lethal energy filled the air. The subject attempts to manipulate via status. The drone intoned, status is irrelevant. Only intent matters. The subject hides behind titles. The subject is a shell. Prepare for sterilization. Whoa! Kale yelled, backing up. Seraphine, a little help? I cannot interfere, Seraphine shouted from the doorway. They must accept you. If I engage, they will seal the archives forever. The drones advanced. The red eyes glowed brighter. Subject uses humor to mask insecurity. The drone analyzed cold and hard. Subject uses sarcasm to deflect pain. Subject is hollow. Kale felt a cold sweat break out on his back. They were not just reading his biometrics, they were reading his psychological profile. They were stripping him naked. Okay, Kale shouted, throwing his hands up. Okay, you want the truth? Fine. He lowered his hands. He looked at the red eye of the machine. He stopped trying to be the diplomat. He stopped trying to be the pilot. He let the exhaustion of the last week, the terror of the bounty, and the confusing, overwhelming weight of the emblem in his pocket crash over him. I am not a lieutenant, Kale said, his voice cracking slightly. I am a delivery boy. I fly a broken ship, and I am terrified. The drones paused. The weapon charge hum lowered in pitch. Elaborate, the voice commanded. I am scared that I am going to get her killed, Kale said, pointing back at Seraphine without looking at her. I am scared that I am just a human with a big mouth who stumbled into a war he does not understand. I am scared that she looks at me like I am a hero. And I know I am just a guy who runs away when things get hard. He took a step forward, his chest heaving. And I am scared because I am holding her heart in my pocket, and I do not know how to protect it. I love her, and that is the most terrifying thing I have ever felt because I know I am not strong enough to be what she needs. But I am here anyway, because if she falls, I fall. The silence that followed was absolute. Kale closed his eyes, waiting for the laser burn. Authenticity rating, 100%, the drone said. The red eyes turned blue. The spheres floated apart, clearing the path to the crystal pillar. Fear is the precursor to courage, the drone intoned. Access granted. Heartkeeper. Kale let out a long, shaky breath. He looked back at Seraphine. She was staring at him, her expression unreadable in the gloom. Heartkeeper, Kale muttered. I think I preferred parasite. He approached the pillar. As his hand touched the crystal interface, the room flooded with light, holographic text, written in the ancient geometric script of the Draconid ancestors. Scrolled in the air. Seraphine hurried to his side, her eyes scanning the data streams. She gasped. This contradicts everything, she whispered. What does it say? Kale asked. She pointed to a rotating diagram of two figures, one Draconid, one undefined, linked by a chestplate interface. The living chestplate was not designed for war. She read, her voice trembling. It was designed for governance. The founders realized that absolute power corrupts the biocore. A leader who rules alone eventually suffers from psionic drift, madness born of isolation. She turned to Kale, her eyes wide. The chest plate requires a second consciousness to ground it. A tether. Someone who is not the leader. Someone who has no power of their own, but who holds the leader accountable. So it is a safety switch? Kale asked. It is a partnership, Seraphine corrected. The text explicitly states, the tether must be chosen not for blood, but for balance. The warrior needs the pacifist. The king needs the commoner. She looked at the diagram again. It was never meant to be locked. Kale. The locking mechanism. The seals. The aristocracy added those later. To keep the power in the bloodlines. To prevent exactly what we have done. Kale looked at the ancient light. We didn't break the law, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. We fixed it. This changes everything, Seraphine said. You are not a thief, Kale. You are the tether. By the ancient laws, my claim to the throne is invalid without you. The weight of the revelation settled on them. Kale looked at the floating text, then at Seraphine. He stepped away from the console, walking toward the edge of the platform where the darkness of the hall stretched out. Kale? Seraphine asked. He didn't turn around. So I am a necessity, he said quietly. A biological circuit breaker to keep you sane. Seraphine stiffened. She walked over to him, the sound of her boots heavy on the stone. Is that what you heard? She asked. It is what the machine said, Kale replied, looking at his hands. The king needs the commoner. I am the grounding wire. I am the accessory that makes the queen legitimate. He turned to face her, and the anger in his eyes surprised her. I do not want to be a symbol. Seraphine, I spent my career in the diplomatic corps being a rubber stamp for people in power. I won't be your rubber stamp. I won't be the human pet that proves you are progressive. Seraphine reached out, grabbing the lapels of his jacket, forcing him to look at her. You idiot, she hissed. She shoved him back against the cold stone of the pillar, her body pressing against his. The heat of her anger and something else radiated through the armor. You think I want a symbol? I have 1,000 symbols. I have flags and crests and statues. I do not need another prop. Then what do you need? Kale shouted back. I need you, she roared, the sound echoing in the vast chamber. The silence rushed back in, leaving them breathing hard, inches apart. I do not need a tether to check a box on a form, Seraphine whispered, her voice breaking. I need the man who drove his ship into a debris field for a stranger. I need the man who made the drones weep with his honesty. I need the man who looks at me and sees Seraphine, not the commander. She took his hand and placed it on the open, empty cavity of her chest plate. The ancient law says I need a partner to rule, she said. But I want you because I cannot imagine ruling without you. Not as a tether, as Kale. Kale looked at her. He saw the imperious warrior who terrified fleets. And he saw the woman who was begging him to understand. I am terrified. Seraphine, he whispered. Good, she said fiercely. So am I. She kissed him. It was not gentle. It was a collision of two worlds crashing together. It was desperate and hungry and tasted of ozone and adrenaline. Kyle's hands found the back of her neck, tangling in the silver braids. Her hands gripped his waist, the strength in them restrained but palpable. The kiss deepened, becoming a conversation of its own, a surrender of the pride they both wore like armor. For a moment, in the tomb of the ancestors, there was no war, no bounty, no politics. There was only the heat of her skin against his, the rough texture of his flight suit against her smooth plating, and the terrifying electric realization that there was no going back. When they finally broke apart, they were both trembling. Seraphine rested her forehead against his chest, "We are in so much trouble," she murmured. "The worst kind." Kale agreed, resting his chin on her head. A siren cut through the intimacy. It was the ship's proximity alarm, relaying from the penitent man. Kale pulled away, checking his wrist comp. Trouble just arrived. They ran back to the ship. On the bridge, the sensors were screaming. But it wasn't a bounty hunter. It was a general broadcast, overridden on all frequencies. A holographic image of a Terran senator, a man Kale recognized from his old life, hovered in the air. Flanked by a Draconid regent and a sleek, reptilian corporate CEO, citizens of the Dominion. The senator spoke, his voice grave and practiced. Due to the escalating instability caused by the rogue Commander Vi and her human accomplice, the Galactic Senate has declared the Draconid sector a failing state. Kyle watched, his blood running cold. Under Article 55 of the Interstellar Charter, the senator continued, "We are authorizing an immediate peacekeeping occupation. A joint coalition of Terran, Krell, and corporate security forces will enter Dominion space to secure key assets and ensure the safety of the populace." Peacekeeping? Seraphine spat the word. "They are invading." The map on the screen updated. Massive fleets were dropping out of warp at the edge of Dominion space, but they weren't going to the refugee worlds. They were heading straight for the industrial sectors, the mining moons, and the shipyards. They are not here to keep the peace, Kale realized. They are here to repo the assets. He looked at Seraphine. The conspiracy. It is not just your cousin selling coordinates. It is a liquidation sale. Your regent destabilized the government so his corporate partners could swoop in and legally seize the entire Dominion infrastructure under the guise of aid. They want the biotech, Seraphine said, her eyes hard. They want the shipyards, and they used me as the excuse to kick down the door. If they land, Kale said, the Dominion ceases to exist. It becomes a corporate colony. Seraphine looked at the map. She looked at the fleet markers of the peacekeepers, thousands of ships against her scattered loyalists. "We cannot fight that fleet," she said quietly. "We do not have the firepower." "No," Kale said, his mind racing. "We cannot win a shooting war, but they are relying on legal cover. They are relying on the claim that the Dominion is a failing state with no legitimate leadership." He looked at Seraphine. He looked at the empty spot in her chest. What if there was legitimate leadership? Kale asked. Seraphine looked at him. "The succession conclave," she said. "It begins in 2 days at the capital. The regent plans to be crowned emperor, cementing the deal with the corporations." "If we interrupt that conclave," Kale said, pacing the deck, "if we present the evidence from the archive, if we show them that the current regime is illegal and that you are the true heir by the ancient laws, they will kill us before we reach the podium." Seraphine said, "The capital will be a fortress. Likely," Kale agreed. "But if we pull it off and we strip away their legal justification for the invasion, if the Dominion has a lawful ruler, the failing state declaration is void. The peacekeepers become invaders. It is a suicide run," Seraphine said. Kale grinned. It was the same grin he had worn when he dove into the debris field. "I have a bad habit of not following the odds," he reminded her. Seraphine looked at him. She reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out the oath emblem. She held it for a moment, the light illuminating her face. She did not put it back in her chest. She handed it back to him. "Then let us go," she said. "Partner." Kyle took the emblem. He felt the bond flare, not with fear this time, but with a cold, steely resolve. "Set a course for the capital," Kale told the computer, "and warm up the shields. We are going to make an entrance." The penitent man turned away from the sanctuary of the archive. The engines flared blue, pushing them toward the heart of the Empire and the eye of the storm. They were two fugitives in a garbage scow against the combined might of three galactic powers. Kale looked at Seraphine, watching the way the stars reflected in her eyes. He knew they probably wouldn't survive the week, but as he pushed the throttle to maximum, he realized he had never felt more alive. The capital city of Ethelgard did not look like it was on the brink of collapse. It looked like a garden grown from the dreams of a benevolent god. The city was a seamless fusion of biology and metallurgy, where star-forged towers of silver and chrome spiraled upward like vines, wrapped in living membranes that shimmered with bioluminescent pulses. The streets were arteries of light, flowing with the lifeblood of the Dominion, hover cars, trade barges, and citizens of a dozen species moving through the grand plazas. But beneath the beauty, the rot was visible. Cale Rourke pulled the hood of his stolen maintenance cowl lower over his face. He walked with a deliberate, heavy gait, mimicking the posture of a sanitation drone operator. Beside him, Seraphine Vi moved with a stiffness that had nothing to do with disguise and everything to do with the tension radiating from her armored frame. She wore the heavy robes of a mute pilgrim, a common sight in the capital, but under the rough fabric. Kyle knew her hand was resting on the grip of a heavy blaster. They walked through the Plaza of Echoes, a massive public square dominated by floating holographic screens the size of office buildings. "Look," Cale whispered, nodding toward the nearest screen. "We are prime time." The screen was looping a grainy, high-contrast video. It was the footage from the bazaar, the moment Seraphine had opened her chest plate. The editors had manipulated the lighting to make the golden glow of her biocore look sickly and red. They had slowed down the audio so her voice sounded distorted, desperate. The caption scrolling beneath the image in jagged galactic script read, "The Madness of House Vi. Submission to the Alien." Seraphine stopped. Cale felt the heat radiating from her, a physical wave of fury that warmed the cold air between them. "They have turned a vow into pornography," she said, her voice a low vibration that Cale felt in his teeth. "They frame it as a surrender, as if I stripped myself naked for a conqueror." Cale stepped closer, blocking her view of the screen with his shoulder. "That is the point. Seraphine. They are trying to shame you into silence. They want you to look at that and feel small." Seraphine looked at him. The golden slit pupils of her eyes were dilated. "I do not feel small. Kyle, I feel ready to burn this city to the bedrock." "Keep the fire banked," Cale advised, guiding her toward the service entrance of the Grand Tribunal Hall. "We need it for the main event." The hall was a cavernous amphitheater carved from the heart of a geode mountain. The ceiling was a dome of natural crystal that amplified the light of the 3 moons overhead. Tonight, the floor was packed with the aristocracy of the Dominion. Thousands of lords and ladies in ceremonial armor, their chest plates glowing with a kaleidoscope of colors representing their lineages. But they were not alone. Interspersed among the Draconid nobility were the sleek, shark-gray uniforms of the corporate alliance and the high-collared dress whites of the Terran peacekeeping force. It was an invasion disguised as a dinner party. On the central dais, sitting on the obsidian throne that by rights belonged to the true heir, was Regent Voros. He was a massive Draconid with scales the color of dried blood and a chest plate that glowed with a harsh, artificial white light. Cale and Seraphine stood in the shadows of the upper gallery, hidden behind a statue of a forgotten ancestor. "He looks comfortable," Cale noted. "He is about to be very uncomfortable," Seraphine said. She dropped the pilgrim's robe. The sound of the heavy fabric hitting the floor was lost in the murmur of the crowd, but the sudden flare of her armor was not. Seraphine had polished her battle plate until it shone like a mirror. But the center, the living heart of the armor, was dark. The chest plate was closed, but the biocore was missing. It was the visual equivalent of a king walking in without a crown. She vaulted over the railing, dropping 20 feet to the main floor. She landed in a crouch, the impact cracking the marble tiles. Kale followed, though his landing was less superhero and more controlled crash, rolling to his feet and snapping his blaster up to cover her flank. The murmur of the crowd died instantly. 3,000 heads turned. Regent Voros stood up, his face twisting in a sneer that was projected onto the floating screens above the dais. "Commander Vi." Voros boomed, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the crystal dome. "We were told you were dead. It seems the reports were optimistic. I am hard to kill." "Regent," Seraphine shouted, her voice clear and unassisted. "Especially when the assassins you send are bought with counterfeit corporate credits." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Voros laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "You speak of corruption? You who parade around the galaxy with your human pet? You who tore open your own sacred armor to pledge fealty to a scavenger?" He pointed a clawed finger at Kale. "Look at him. A soft-heart human. A failure from his own diplomatic corps. Did he whisper sweet lies to you, Seraphine? Did he promise you love if you gave him the keys to the kingdom?" The crowd laughed. It was a nervous, tittering sound, fueled by the propaganda they had been fed for weeks. Kale stepped forward. He felt the weight of 3,000 pairs of eyes. He felt the sweat trickling down his back. But he also felt the reassuring weight of the oath emblem in his jacket pocket, humming against his ribs. He lowered his blaster. He smiled. It was the smile he used when the engines were on fire and the landing gear was stuck. A smile of absolute, reckless confidence. "You know, Regent," Kale said, his voice projecting surprisingly well. "You keep calling me soft. I prefer the term flexible. It helps when you are dodging the knives your own family tries to stick in your back." Silence. No one spoke to the regent like that. And as for seduction, Kale continued, walking casually toward the dais, ignoring the guards who were raising their weapons. "You have it backward. I didn't seduce her. She terrified me. Have you met her? She threatened to throw me out of an airlock 5 minutes after we met. It was very romantic." A few chuckles broke out in the back of the hall. Younger officers, mostly. "Enough of this farce." Voros roared. "Guards! Seize the traitor and her creature! Wait!" Seraphine's voice cracked like a whip. She raised her hand, holding a small data crystal, the one from the archive. "You call me a traitor because I shared my oath with a human," Seraphine declared. "You claim the living chestplate is a symbol of draconid purity. You claim that sharing it with an outsider is madness." She threw the crystal into the central projector pit. But what does the first breath say? The holographic projectors flared to life. The massive image from the archive filled the air above the conclave. The ancient text scrolled, translated instantly into the modern tongue. The diagram of the two figures, the leader and the tether, rotated for all to see. "Read it," Seraphine commanded. The chestplate was not a crown, it was a covenant. It was designed to bind the leader to a partner who possessed no power, only truth. A partner who would stop the drift into tyranny. The crowd murmured. Lords were leaning forward, reading the ancient laws. The legitimacy of the regent's argument was crumbling in real time. Seraphine pointed at Voros. "You locked the chest plates. Your ancestors fused the seals to hoard power. You made the oath a prison of bloodline purity so you could sell our people to the highest bidder without anyone to check your greed." "Lies!" Voros screamed. It is a fabrication, a human trick, is it? Kale asked. He reached into his jacket. He pulled out the oath emblem. The sight of the naked, pulsing biocore silenced the room again. It was a taboo object, something never seen outside the chest of a living commander. The archive drones accepted me, Kyle said, holding the crystal up. They didn't ask for my pedigree. They didn't ask for my bank account. They asked for my intent. He looked at the crowd. I am not her master. I am not her owner. I am her tether. I am the one who reminds her that refugees are people, not statistics. I am the one who reminds her that honor means protecting the weak, not serving the strong. Kale turned to Seraphine. I am her equal, and that is what terrifies you, Regent. Because if she can share power, then you have no excuse for hoarding it. Voros looked at the crowd. He saw the doubt in the eyes of the high houses. He saw the Terran generals exchanging nervous glances. He was losing control. Kill them! Voros shrieked. Kill them all! The illusion of order shattered. From the shadows behind the throne, 4 figures in stealth armor materialized. Assassins. At the same moment, the corporate agents in the crowd drew concealed weapons, lunging not for Seraphine, but for Kale and the emblem. It was a coup, naked and ugly. Kale dove to the left as a plasma bolt scorched the air where his head had been. Get down, he yelled, tackling a bewildered Draconid scribe to the ground as debris rained from the ceiling. Seraphine moved. She was a blur of silver and fury. She intercepted the first assassin, catching his vibro blade on her gauntlet. She didn't have the biocore in her chest to power the armor's strength enhancement, but she had 100 years of combat experience. She used the assassin's own momentum to throw him into the second attacker. Kale rolled behind a pillar. He saw a group of corporate agents advancing on the dais, ignoring the fight, focused entirely on seizing the archive projector. They wanted to destroy the evidence. Oh no, you do not, Kale muttered. He scanned the room. He saw a heavy decorative tapestry hanging above the agents, secured by a single rope. Improvisation, Kyle said to himself. He fired his blaster, severing the rope. The tapestry, weighted with gold thread and heavy rods, crashed down, burying the agents in a heap of velvet and dust. Kale scrambled up the dais, grabbing the microphone from the podium. Security! Kale bellowed, his voice booming over the chaos. The Regent is attacking the tribunal. Protect the high houses. It was a lie, mostly, but it worked. The neutral house guards, confused by the sudden violence, instinctively moved to protect their own lords from the Regent's mercenaries. The hall dissolved into a 3-way brawl. The Regent's forces, the confused house guards, and the corporate hit squads trying to kill everyone. Seraphine was fighting back-to-back with a young lieutenant who had jumped from the crowd to aid her. She took a glancing blow from a stun baton to her shoulder, staggering back. Her unpowered armor was heavy, slowing her down. An assassin lunged for her exposed throat. Seraphine! Kale yelled. He didn't shoot the assassin. He couldn't get a clean shot. Instead, he threw the microphone at the assassin's head. It struck with a sickening thud, distracting the killer for the fraction of a second Seraphine needed. She drove a knee into the assassin's chest and tossed him off the dais. She looked at Kale, breathless, blood trickling from a cut above her eye. Nice throw, she shouted. I aim to please. Kale shouted back, ducking another laser bolt. The battle was turning. The sheer brutality of the Regent's attack had turned the neutral factions against him. But the Terran peacekeeping troops were moving in, heavy boots stomping toward the center. They were the wild card. Kale saw the Terran commander, a general he recognized from news feeds, raising his hand to order a volley that would wipe out everyone on the dais. General Harkin! Kale shouted, standing up in full view. The general paused. I know you, Kale yelled, holding up the oath emblem. You served with my father at the Orav blockade. You refused to fire on the civilian transports. The general hesitated. He looked at the glowing draconid heart in Kale's hand. This is not a peacekeeping mission. General, Kale continued, walking down the steps, ignoring the crossfire. Look at the screens. Seraphine had reached the console. She jammed the data chip from the refugee moon into the main feed. The ancient text vanished. In its place, the damning telemetry from the ambush appeared. The bank transfers. The emails between Regent Voros and the corporate alliance detailing the sale of the Dominion's mining rights in exchange for the peacekeeping fleet. The evidence scrolled across the giant screens 50 feet high. Every soldier, every lord, every spy saw the price tag attached to their war. They engineered the crisis, Kale shouted, pointing at the screen. They created the refugees so they could charge you to rescue them. They are not saving the Dominion. General, they are repossessing it. General Harkin looked at the screen. He looked at the regent, who was screaming orders that no one was listening to. He looked at his own troops, who were lowering their rifles. Stand down, the general ordered his men. Secure the perimeter. No one leaves. Voros realized it was over. The corporate agents were fleeing. His guards were surrendering. He pulled a hidden blaster from his robes and aimed it at Seraphine's back. If I cannot rule it, I will break it, Voros screamed. Kale saw the motion. He was too far away to reach her. He was too far away to push her. Seraphine. She turned. She saw the weapon. She didn't flinch. She didn't have to. The young lieutenant she had fought beside stepped in front of her. The bolt hit his shield generator, flaring blue but holding. Voros stared in horror. His own people were shielding her. Seraphine walked toward the regent. She did not run. She walked with the terrifying, inexorable gait of a glacier. You forgot the first rule of command. Voros, she said, her voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence of the hall. She reached out and grabbed the barrel of his blaster, crushing it with her gauntleted hand. She ripped it from his grip and backhanded him across the face. He crumbled to the floor, a heap of expensive robes and broken ambition. Loyalty is earned, Seraphine said, looking down at him. Not bought. The hall was silent. Dust motes danced in the projector beams. The evidence of treason continued to scroll on the screens. Seraphine turned to the crowd. She looked battered. Her armor was scorched, her face was bleeding, and she was exhausted. But she had never looked more like a queen. She looked at Kyle. He was standing at the foot of the dais, holding the oath emblem. He looked back at her, his expression open and unguarded. Come here, she said. Kale walked up the steps. He stopped in front of her. Seraphine took a breath. She spoke to the crowd, but she looked only at him. You called him a thief, she said to the thousands of watchers. You called him a weakness. She took Kale's hand, the one holding the emblem. I gave him this, she said, her voice shaking with emotion, because he was the only one brave enough to tell me the truth when I wanted to hear lies. I gave him this because he protected my compassion when I tried to destroy it. She placed her hand over his, over the biocore. This was not an act of surrender. It was an act of sovereignty. I chose him, and in choosing him, I chose a future where we do not rule by fear. She looked deep into Kale's eyes. Give it to me. Heartkeeper. Kale smiled. It was a soft, sad, beautiful smile. He lifted the emblem. He didn't just hand it to her. He pressed it against the empty socket of her chest plate. The magnetic locks engaged with a solid, final click. The light returned. A pulse of golden energy washed over Seraphine, flowing through the armor, healing the microfractures, sealing the connection. Her eyes flared with renewed power. But this time, the light wasn't cold, it was warm. It pulsed in time with Kale's own heartbeat, a rhythm they now shared. Kale stepped back. "I am not your owner, Seraphine," he said clearly. "And I am not your shield." "Then what are you?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Kale looked at the stunned Senate, the arrested regent, and the waiting galaxy. "I am your partner," he said, "and we have a lot of work to do." The applause did not start instantly. It began with the young lieutenant. Then the scribe Kale had saved. Then General Harkin slowly clapped his gloved hands. Then the neutral houses joined in. It grew into a roar, a wave of sound that shook the crystal dome. It was not the polite applause of a court. It was the messy, loud, chaotic sound of a revolution. The screens above changed. The propaganda loop of the scandal was replaced by a live feed of the regent being placed in binders by the peacekeeping troops. The narrative had broken. The invasion had lost its mask. Kale stood beside Seraphine as the cheers washed over them. He leaned in close. "You know," he whispered, "this is going to make the diplomatic paperwork an absolute nightmare." Seraphine laughed. It was a free, unburdened sound. "Let them file the paperwork," she said, taking his hand. "We have an empire to fix." Outside, the great singing towers of Uthelgard began to chime, signaling the end of the conclave and the beginning of something entirely new. The war was not over. The fleets were still there. The corporations were still hungry. But the Dominion had found its heart again. And it was beating in the chest of a woman who was holding the hand of a human delivery driver. The victory at the tribunal had been a hammer blow to the conspiracy. But Kale Rourke knew better than anyone that wounded beasts were the most dangerous. The arrest of Regent Voros had not stopped the war. It had simply forced the true architects to step out of the shadows. 3 days after the coup was thwarted, the alarms on the bridge of the defected heavy cruiser Iron Covenant began to scream. Kale stood by the tactical table, watching the hololith bleed red. The Covenant was the flagship of their ragtag armada, a collection of stolen house frigates, retrofitted mining barges, and civilian blockade runners that looked more like a scrapyard than a fleet. Against them, emerging from the dark side of the moon Omelos, was the pristine, terrifying silhouette of the Apex, a corporate dreadnought 3 times their size, flanked by a squadron of automated kill drones. "They are targeting the refugee corridor," Seraphine said, her voice tight. She stood beside him, her armor scuffed but the golden light of the living chestplate burning steady and bright. She pointed to the trajectory lines on the display. "That is a false flag maneuver," she analyzed cold and fast. "They are going to fire a singularity torpedo into the civilian convoy, detonating it with a frequency that mimics Draconid royal weaponry. Then they will blame us. They will say the Mad Queen sacrificed her own people to hold power." "It is brilliant," Kale admitted, feeling the familiar cold knot of dread in his stomach. "And evil. If that torpedo hits, we lose the moral high ground instantly. The galaxy will beg the corporations to come save them from us." Seraphine turned to him. Her hand drifted to the hilt of her blade, a nervous tic she had developed since the bond had opened her emotional floodgates. "We have to intercept," she said. "But Kale, I am afraid." Kale looked up from the tactical data. "Afraid of the dreadnought?" "No," Seraphine said softly, her eyes searching his. "Afraid that I will hesitate. Before the bond, I would have rammed this ship into theirs without blinking. I would have spent 1,000 lives to save 1,000,000. But now, when I look at the tactical map, I do not see assets. I see faces. I see you. She gripped the edge of the table, the metal groaning under her gauntlet. Love makes me slow, Kyle. It makes me want to survive. And a commander who wants to survive is a liability. Kale reached out, covering her armored hand with his own. The connection between them, the psionic tether, hummed with her anxiety. He felt her terror, sharp and metallic. You are looking at it wrong, Kale said firmly. He squeezed her hand, sending a pulse of steady, grounding warmth back through the link. Indifference is not strength, Seraphine. It is just numbness. When you don't care, you make sloppy choices because the cost doesn't matter. But now the cost matters. He gestured to the view screen, where the enemy fleet was powering its weapons. You won't hesitate because you are weak. You will strike harder because you know exactly what happens if you miss. Love does not blur the target, it sharpens it. Seraphine took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, drawing on the stability he offered. When she opened them, the fear was gone, replaced by a crystalline focus. Then let us be sharp, she said. She turned to the comms officer. Open a channel to the fleet. All ships, form up on my wing. Target the apex. We are not just fighting a ship. We are fighting a lie. The battle that followed was not the elegant, choreographed warfare of the Academy simulations. It was a brawl. The coalition fleet surged forward. Mining barges shielded the frigates with their heavy hulls, taking punishing laser fire while the faster ships darted in to disable the drone swarms. It was chaotic, desperate, and loud. On the bridge of the Iron Covenant, sparks rained from the ceiling as a kinetic round slammed into the forward shields. Shields at 40%, the tactical officer shouted. The Apex is charging its main battery. Kale was not flying the ship this time. He was at the ops console, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. I need 3 minutes, Kale yelled over the klaxons. I am inside their financial grid, but the encryption is shifting every 10 seconds. You have 2 minutes, Seraphine corrected, bracing herself as the ship listed violently to port. The plan was not to destroy the Apex. They didn't have the firepower. The plan was to expose it. Kale had theorized that the corporate alliance was funding this black budget operation through a shell company registered in the neutral zones. If he could link the firing codes of the Singularity torpedo to a corporate bank transfer in real time, every treaty in the galaxy would trigger an automatic ceasefire. The mercenaries would lose their legal immunity. Got it, Kale shouted. He bypassed the firewall using a backdoor code he had memorized during his days in the diplomatic corps, a code intended for auditing relief funds. Broadcasting now. Kale slammed his hand onto the execute key, across the sector, on the HUDs of the opposing mercenary pilots and the Terran peacekeepers hanging back in reserve. A file opened. It showed the purchase order for the Singularity torpedo. It showed the signature of Director Cray, the head of the corporate alliance. And it showed the target coordinates, Civilian Convoy Beta. The effect was instantaneous. The Terran peacekeeper fleet, which had been holding position, suddenly lit up its engines. But they didn't advance on Seraphine. They turned their weapons toward the Apex. This is General Harkin of the Terran Command. A voice crackled over the open frequency. Director Cray, you are in violation of the Convention on Engineered Catastrophes. Power down your vessel, or we will open fire. The Apex did not power down. Instead, it launched the torpedo. A streak of black antimatter shot from the Dreadnought's launch tube, racing toward the helpless refugee ships. They are ignoring the order, Kale shouted. They are going to detonate it anyway to cover their tracks. Seraphine did not shout. She moved. Helm, intercept course, she ordered, Ramming speed. Commander, the helmsman stammered. We cannot stop a singularity weapon. It will eat the ship. We are not going to hit the torpedo, Seraphine said. Heading for the airlock. We are going to board the launcher. Cale didn't argue. He grabbed his blaster and ran after her. They launched in a boarding pod, a tiny metal coffin that screamed through the void between the two capital ships. The Iron Covenant provided covering fire, blasting a hole in the Apex's launch bay doors. The pod smashed into the dreadnought's hull with a bone-jarring crunch. Explosive bolts blew the hatch, and the air rushed out, leaving them in the silent, floating world of zero gravity. Gravity is offline in this sector. Cale's voice echoed in his helmet comms. Seraphine was in her element. She kicked off the bulkhead, spinning through the debris-filled hangar like a silver dart. She fired her wrist-mounted casters, taking out 2 corporate security droids before they could mag-lock to the floor. Cale struggled to orient himself, grabbing a handhold as a plasma bolt sizzled past his ear. This way, Seraphine commanded. The fire control center is 2 decks up. They fought their way through the corridors of the Apex. It was a cinematic fever dream of zero-G combat. Seraphine used the mass manipulation properties of her chestplate to create localized gravity wells, pulling enemies off the ceiling and slamming them into the floor. Cale covered her, his diplomatic instincts serving him even here. He shot out the lighting panels, plunging the corridors into darkness where Seraphine's thermal vision gave them the Predator's advantage. They breached the fire control center. Director Cray was waiting for them. He was a slight man in a bespoke suit that cost more than Cale's entire life earnings. Standing calmly behind a blast shield while his technicians worked frantically to arm the torpedo's remote detonator. Cray looked up as they burst in. He didn't look afraid. He looked annoyed. Lieutenant Rourke, Cray said, his voice smooth over the intercom. You are remarkably persistent for a man with a ruined career. Cancel the detonation. Cray, Cale said, leveling his weapon at the glass. Cray chuckled. He tapped a command on his console. I can make you a deal. Kyle. We both know you are the brains behind this little revolution. The commander is just the muscle. Walk away, let the torpedo hit, and I will reinstate you. Not as a junior lieutenant, as an ambassador. You can write the history books. You can say you tried to stop the Mad Dragon Lady, but failed. You will be a hero. Cale paused. He looked at Seraphine. She was tense, ready to spring, but she waited. She wanted to see what he would do. An ambassador. Cale mused. Nice office. Expense account. No more freeze-dried rations. Exactly. Cray smiled. Integrity is expensive. Lieutenant, vindication is free. Cale looked back at Cray. You are right, Cale said. Integrity is expensive. But I have a very rich partner. He fired. Not at Cray, but at the gravity generator above Cray's head. The massive unit tore loose, crashing down through the blast shield, crushing the console and Cray's escape route in a shower of sparks and glass. Seraphine leaped through the shattered window. She grabbed the terrified technicians and threw them toward the exit. Get out! She roared. She turned to the primary interface. The countdown for the torpedo detonation was ticking. 30 seconds. The remote link is severed, Seraphine shouted. I have to manually override the signal frequency to disarm the warhead, but the feedback, it will kill you, Cale realized. The surge of energy required to hack a singularity weapon would fry her nervous system through the biocore. Seraphine looked at him. There was no fear in her eyes now. Only a terrible, beautiful acceptance. Go, Cale. Get to the pod. No, Cale said, stepping toward her. This is a command. Heartkeeper, she yelled, her hand hovering over the interface. I am the commander. I spend the lives. This is my life to spend. She slammed her hand onto the console. The surge hit her. Her back arched, and a scream was torn from her throat as blue lightning crackled over her armor. The living chest plate flared blindingly bright, struggling to process the overload. Kyle didn't run. He lunged forward. He didn't try to pull her hand off the console. That would break the connection and detonate the torpedo. Instead, he grabbed her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing his chest against the back of her armor. He closed his eyes and reached for the bond. He didn't use tech. He used the tether. He poured everything he was into the connection. He visualized the electrical storm tearing through her nerves and offered himself as a ground. Share it. He projected into her mind. You are not alone. You do not die alone. Seraphine gasped. The crushing weight of the energy suddenly split. Kale felt it hit him like a physical blow, a white-hot agony that tasted of copper and fire. His knees buckled, but he held on. He anchored her. He became the human heat sink for her dragon's fire. Together, screaming into the silence of the ship. They forced the override code through. On the tactical display, the torpedo's signal turned green. It drifted harmlessly into the void. A dud. The feedback pulse ended. Kale and Seraphine collapsed onto the deck of the burning control room, tangled together, smoke rising from their clothes. Kale coughed, tasting blood. Is everyone okay? Seraphine rolled over, groaning. She looked at him, her eyes wide with wonder. You stayed, she whispered. I told you. Kale wheezed, grinning through the pain. I am the grounding wire. The war ended not with a bang, but with a signature. With the false flag exposed and Director Cray in custody, the corporate coalition collapsed. The Terran peacekeepers occupied the corporate shipyards, and the Dominion Senate, terrified of the public uprising, voted unanimously to dissolve the Regency. 6 months later, the Grand Hall of Ethelgard was once again packed, but the atmosphere was different. The heavy silence of fear was gone, replaced by the chaotic, vibrant noise of a democracy in its infancy. Seraphine stood at the podium. She was not wearing battle armor. She wore the ceremonial robes of the First Minister, open at the collar to reveal the living chest plate. But the armor had changed. It was no longer a solid, impenetrable piece. It was filigreed, open, designed to be accessed. We are a people of oaths. Seraphine addressed the galaxy, but for too long, our oaths were chains. Today, we forge a new covenant. She signed the document on the hololith before her, the Transparency Accord. Under the new law, the living chestplate system was voluntary. No leader could hold high office without a tether, a partner from outside their house, outside their species, chosen by public vote to share the burden of command. The biocore data, the emotional state, the financial records, the truth of the leader would be public record. Refugee relief was codified as the primary mandate of the Dominion fleet. War profiteering was punishable by immediate asset forfeiture. It was a messy, difficult system. It was imperfect, but it was honest. After the ceremony, Kale and Seraphine retreated to the quiet of the ancestral meditation chamber high in the spire. The walls were lined with the statues of dead kings who had ruled alone. Kale leaned against a pillar, loosening his tie. He wore a simple suit. No medals, no rank insignia. He was just Kale. You did good out there, he said. You didn't threaten to airlock a single senator. I thought about it, Seraphine admitted, walking over to the window to look out at the rebuilt city. When the representative from the mining guild asked for a tax exemption, I visualized his trajectory into the sun. But you didn't do it, Kale noted. No, I didn't. Seraphine turned to him. Because I could feel your amusement through the bond, and it distracted me. She walked closer to him. The golden light of the chest plate cast a warm glow on her face. She looked younger, lighter, as if the weight of centuries had been lifted from her shoulders. "Cale Rourke," she said softly. "We have rebuilt the laws. We have secured the peace. The power is within reach." She reached up and unlatched the chest plate. It opened with a soft chime, revealing the oath emblem resting in its cradle. "I ask you again, as I asked you in the dark of the bazaar, what do you desire?" Cale looked at the emblem. He looked at the power it represented, the ability to command fleets, to rule systems. Then he looked at her face. He reached out, but he didn't take the emblem. He placed his hand gently over her heart, skin to skin, bypassing the technology entirely. "The same thing," Cale said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your heart, and the life we build around it." Seraphine smiled. It was a smile that reached her eyes, brilliant and unguarded. She closed the chest plate. She didn't lock it. She simply fastened it, a protective covering for something precious, not a cage for something dangerous. "Then it is yours," she whispered. She stepped back, her expression turning mischievous. "Now," she said, "there is one final matter. The council is waiting for the formalization of our union. You must speak the vow of the tether in High Draconid." Cale groaned. "I have been practicing for weeks. It is impossible. Your language has 18 vowels that require a second tongue to pronounce." "Just try," she urged. Cale straightened his jacket. He cleared his throat. He looked at her with all the love and solemnity he possessed. "Arachna vo shul, Cale vo." Cale paused, searching for the word. "Vo gizzard." Seraphine blinked. "Gizzard?" she asked. "I meant soul," Cale said, panicking. "Cale vo soul." "No," Seraphine said, her shoulders shaking. "You definitely said gizzard. You just pledged your eternal digestive tract to the service of the Empire." Cale buried his face in his hands. "I am going to be the laughingstock of the galaxy." Seraphine didn't scold him. She didn't correct him. Instead, she threw her head back and laughed. It was a loud, joyous sound that echoed off the stone walls, startling the relic drones hovering in the corners. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door. "Come, my brave tether," she said, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "Let us go tell the council about your gizzard." They walked out of the chamber and into the light of the council hall. The doors opened, and the galaxy was waiting for them. Cale Rourke, the human who couldn't pronounce a vow to save his life. And Seraphine Vi, the dragon lady who had learned to laugh. They walked forward together, hand in hand, two imperfect people who had saved the world by simply refusing to let go. And as the applause rose to meet them, Cale thought that maybe, just maybe, the gizzard was the most important part after all.